Okay, hey everyone. It's been quite a while since Daryl and I have gotten together to do a podcast. It's been several months. I don't remember the date of the last one, but really excited for this one. Today we have Elliot Roe joining us, who is a professional hypnotherapist specializing in poker players and UFC fighters. Elliot, thank you for joining us today.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, pleasure. So, one of the things I kind of wanted to lead off with is to ask you how you got started with doing hypnotherapy and how you decided that was what you wanted to do.
Okay, so in a previous life now, I used to work in properties and renewable energy, bizarrely, in England a long time ago. And I had a really bad fear of flying. And someone had recommended a hypnotherapist to me, which I was really skeptical about. And in one session, she managed to remove my fear of flying, which to me felt magical. And it all made absolute sense to me. So I'd seen this thing where someone had completely changed my life because, I had basically refused trips to America in the past and things like that purely because I didn't want to get on long-haul flights. So suddenly the whole world was open to me, and it was down to that hypnotherapy session. And I thought I'd learn that on the side. So I started doing a course in hypnotherapy, not ever really thinking I'd be a hypnotherapist, but more out of interest. And passed the course, got sort of insured and licensed and things, and started doing it part-time, mainly working with golfers. And that was going okay, and someone recommended, one of my friends works in poker, and said I should be talking to poker players. If I think golfers are getting stressed, poker players get even more stressed. So I put an advert on 2+2, and really everything grew from there. It ended up becoming my full-time job because it was going really well. And year on year, it's just got stronger and stronger, to be honest. I've been very lucky with the players I've worked with, and lots of people had some quite extreme success. And that's basically the very Cliff Notes version of my foray into becoming a hypnotherapist.
Okay, great. So basically, you decided to seek a hypnotherapist, and it went so well for you that you decided that was something you wanted to pursue. And
yeah, it was almost, to start off with, it was something I almost felt obliged to learn because of the impact it had had on my life. Okay. And I didn't necessarily think it would be the calling of my life. I just thought, it would be quite nice if, I meet someone, or one of my friends or family has an issue like I had, and I could sort it out in an hour. And as I say, just bizarrely, it ended up being my calling and what I'm doing now as a profession.
Okay. What would you say your first step was after going to your first hypnotherapy session and deciding it was something you wanted to learn more about and get into? How did you go about starting to learn about hypnotherapy?
So I think the first step was I just basically looked for the most comprehensive course I could find on the internet. And there was one that was about an hour away from where I was living. And basically I signed up to that course. So that's I basically researched it on the internet, found a course to me that looked like it was very comprehensive, and decided to go for that one.
What made you think it was comprehensive? What did you like about it?
Well, the first thing was, so hypnotherapy, one of the problems with the industry, which, I'm going to be sort of open and honest about, is it's not very regulated. So if you say you want to learn to be a hypnotherapist, there are courses which are weekend courses, and there are courses up to what I did that was a year's course in hypnotherapy. And I wasn't really very interested in going for a weekend because I personally don't believe it's something that can be learnt in that period of time. It covered a lot of the things that I wanted to learn. I wanted to do the regression-based therapy, where you take people back to their childhoods and look to resolve issues, because that's how my problems have been solved. And some of the courses, certainly seems more popular here in America, only do suggestion-based hypnotherapy, which is like my MP3s, which is just the hypnotherapist talking at you, but then it's not really looking to resolve any deep-seated issues. It's just the use of suggestion, which for some people is very effective, but it personally, I don't think it's the right approach for really resolving a deep-seated anxiety or issue.
Right. So your fear of flying was not to get too personal, but it was like stemmed from a childhood issue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite happy to talk about it actually because it gives sort of an idea of how the process works. So I had since being a child a pretty significant fear of flying. As I say, it put me off long haul. I'd fly to Europe. I'm obviously from England, so I'd get on a 1 hour or 2 hour flight, but not comfortably, and a flight would usually ruin my holiday. So I'd be scared the week before the holiday, I'd go on holiday and be scared for the holiday, and then have to face the flight back. So it made most traveling for me pretty miserable. And anyone who's got a phobia will tell you it's because you have that sort of effectively, it's like a fear of death. Anything that you're truly scared of, even if it's not rational, is because you believe that, this might be finishing you off. Someone who's scared of spiders, it is terror. And it really was for me on the planes. I would sit on them, but I would be a nightmare for my friends and family on the plane with me. Nice and embarrassing stuff, but it's the truth. So basically, I went to the hypnotherapist, and same with my sessions, you're looking for the root cause, the reason behind it. And so I bring up this memory of being about 3 or 4 years old and being shown a picture of a small private jet at my granddad's house, and being told by my mum, oh, that jet's to do with your granddad's company. It crashed and it killed 2 of his business partners. So at 3 years old, I'd been told, your granddad's friends died in this plane. And from that, I had believed that planes were the most terrifying, whatever it is. And as soon as she reached that, and I had sort of an understanding of where the fear was coming from, and it's hard to describe, but within hypnotherapy, you have a form of emotional release, which for some people feels like a weight coming off them, other people cry. But as soon as that went, and then I came out of the session, I thought, oh, well, planes don't seem that scary anymore. And it's because effectively the program had been adjusted that I was running. I understood it was faulty, and it was just something I'd picked up as a child. And most of the deep-seated fears are silly things like that from childhood that stick with us. And we just don't, it's very difficult to change those rationally, because in my conscious mind, I had no idea of that. I didn't remember that situation. But then, I spoke to my mum afterwards, and she said, that is what happened with that plane. Yeah, we did tell you that.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, this is very cool. I should learn this.
All right. So the first question I thought of is, you have 2 kids. So how does this change how you parent them?
It really does. So I'm incredibly cautious about everything, I think to a fault with that stuff now, because you can imagine, I talk to a lot of clients over the week, and everyone has their things their parents did to mess them up, because all of our parents mess us up in some way or another. But the problem is, my list of things not to do is week on week, so I'm walking on eggshells with them most of the time. So we try and, nothing is scary, everything is happy, and, we'll see how it works. But, as I say, it can be something as silly as, they're in school when they're 5 and their teacher starts screaming at a spider and they pick up a pair of spiders. They're the sort of things I hear when I'm doing the sessions. And you can't control everything, but there are some things where it's quite clear that there is a more effective version of parenting, I would say. And yeah, we try and do things in the right way for them. And, as everyone does, you keep your fingers crossed and you wait to hear what they blame you for when they're 21.
Right. What do you think are the biggest mistakes that parents make based on your sessions with people, or just based on whatever? I don't know.
I would say the things that seem to affect it's when the parents become the children. So it's when the parents are caught up in their own lives and the young children are becoming the adult in the situation, and trying to be the peacemaker between mum and dad, or trying to console the parent the whole time. And it's quite difficult for children to, I think a lot of people feel like they lose their childhood that way if the pressures of the family are put on the child instead. So I would say as far as possible when you're stressed. If you are a parent out there, if you don't want them talking to someone like me in 10 years' time, really try and, if you're unhappy and there's issues in the marriage, go and see a counselor. Don't talk to your 9-year-old is the way I would put it.
That makes sense.
Elliot, I wanted to ask you a question about you mentioned when you first got started in hypnotherapy, you started out working with golfers.
Yeah.
I was wondering, did you start working with golfers because that was sort of an easy point of entry, where golfers were a crowd that was kind of used to hiring hypnotherapists, or is that just a world you were in? Did you know a lot of golfers that needed help?
I was just in an area with an abundance of golf courses, and I knew a lot of golfers. And it's quite an easy golf, like poker, is a very mental game. So it's quite easy for people to understand that it's a mental game as well. So they're aware of it, and therefore they're going to be quite open to something like hypnotherapy. So it was just an easy entry. And as I say, initially it really was, I would see friends for like quit smoking or weight loss, and then, as I say, the golfers. And it almost started off as a hobby for me from that side. And then it just started to grow and grow. And I found it more interesting than my other work. And then, it just basically all ended up taking off. So I guess that slightly answers the question.
No, that's a great answer. And when you started to transition into working with poker players, were you surprised by the differences, or did you see a lot of the same issues?
More by the similarities, and that's continued with almost any different sector that I go into. The guys with the issues on the golf course is the same as the poker players, is the same as the UFC fighters, it's the same as the stockbrokers. It's just the same stuff coming up again and again and again. And a lot of this is to do with the fact that you're not really resolving necessarily a very sport-specific problem most of the time. You're solving someone's life problem that is also showing up in the sport that they play. So the guy who gets really angry at the poker table usually also has issues with road rage, or can't cope with someone cutting in the queue, or whatever else. And we're dealing with the core anger issue, and that's just, because he's an angry person. And the stockbroker who has an anger issue, usually they're the same sorts of things that come up as it does for the poker player or the UFC fighter or anyone else. So yeah, it's very interesting. It was surprising at first, but the more different sectors I've gone into, the more I've seen that everything just seems to repeat sector after sector.
Are there common problems that I guess poker players have?
Procrastination's probably the biggest one.
Like not studying?
Not studying and even not playing, struggling following a schedule. I would say in poker that comes up probably a bit more than it does in the other things, slightly more percentage-wise, which surprised me, because initially I thought everything was going to be about tilt. And I get a decent amount of tilt work, but I would say the dominant issue is, I'm procrastinating, I'm not doing my study, I'm struggling to start sessions, and people not really understanding where that's coming from. And usually it's a form of self-sabotage, a fear of failure, a fear of success that's stopping them reach their potential from that side.
And does that stem from a childhood issue?
Yeah, so often what comes up with that, which is quite interesting with poker players, is they'll talk about being early on the cleverest kid in school and not having to work. So typically poker players are pretty intelligent people if they're successful. So they were pretty intelligent as a child as well. And a lot of people learn, if they can get the good results without working hard, they start to judge that as more impressive than the children who have to work hard to get the same results. Right. And it starts to become almost something where they take a pride in not having to work hard at things. And this works great in primary and high school or middle school, and then starts to be not so good in high school, where suddenly the A student is getting Bs. And then a lot of people have struggled in college because they've not done their dissertations on time or whatever else, and then they've ended up in poker. And yeah, that comes up a lot. And a lot of the time there's also a fear of, so you've got this ego there because you've done well without working hard a lot of the time. There's a fear that if you did work hard, but then you didn't do well, then that would be very meaningful and damage your ego that you've kept going for all of these years. Because it's very easy to tell yourself, okay, well, I got a B, but I could have worked hard. I could have got an A. But it's a lot harder to say I worked as hard as I possibly could and I still got a B. So a lot of people are defending themselves from that fear of failure.
Yeah, I noticed myself taking a silly sense of pride or in wanting to not have to work for it. And like a lot of things and simple things, like if I'm playing a new game or something like that. And I'm always catch myself and realize this is stupid, but
it's hard, isn't it, to work through it on your own?
Yeah, it's pervasive. It's very difficult.
And that sense of pride is built because people will also comment on it. So their friends will say, "You're so lucky you don't have to work as hard as me. You're so clever." Da, da, da. So all of these things get said. They get, you get told how intelligent you are, and then the thought of working hard and, as I say, that fear of failure for some people can really put them off ever putting a lot of work into anything, because that's a far more scary prospect for them. It takes them out of their comfort zone.
So you were talking about praising people. Are people getting praised? How do you praise your children?
Oh no, we praise our children, but I wouldn't. I mean, I would be cautious about praising them for not working hard.
Right.
So I wouldn't be saying, "Well done, you put no effort in at school and you got an A."
Right. No, I would. Right. There's a debate about not ever telling your kids that they're smart or intelligent, like just complimenting hard work and effort or good manners or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one, and I've heard the same debate about not telling your daughters they're beautiful because that might in some way make them think that only beauty is important. I would say it depends on the child and how they're responding, and a lot of children are really looking for some form of compliment from their parent, and not getting the compliment does seem to be quite damaging. So I do agree with you. It would definitely make more sense for most people to be praised for, well done, you've worked so hard, those sorts of things. But I think it's important that praise does come. It comes up a lot in my sessions where people have worked hard. They've got, let's say, 97 out of 100 in exam. They've gone and shown their dad, and their dad said, "Only 3 wrong this time. Oh, you can do better next time." Right. And the kid's thinking, I got 97 out of 100. I'm not even going to try anymore because this is just ridiculous. Unless I'm perfect, I'm going to be told I'm not good enough. So that's something where if someone's done something that is obviously impressive, even if it's not perfect, I would say still praise your kid in that situation, because that comes up. I mean, I've probably had 20 clients with similar stories to that have caused issues for them. So yeah, be aware of that one.
Yeah, I don't know about your older daughter, but my older daughter is like, "Daddy, look at me," like 20 times a day.
Well, mine are twins, and they're only 2 years old, so we haven't really kicked in for that yet. So yeah, she wants to be told how great she is, Daryl.
Yeah, that's what I have to do multiple times a day.
I think part of the problem is a focus on results as opposed to effort, and that's something that's talked about a lot in poker, but I think that it's an issue that's prevalent in all areas of life. If you get a good result, then you're going to be much more likely to feel good about it and receive praise from it. But if you get an A in a 100 level course that you don't even have to show up to get the A, you're going to get a lot more satisfaction and praise out of that than if you get a C or a B in a really difficult course where 75% of people fail it.
I agree with you completely. And I think it's something, if people could, really look at the effort they put into things rather than necessarily the results they get out. And as you say, like sort of treating your children that way, like you said, like having that as a mindset, the praise is for the hard work. So it doesn't matter even if you fail. If you've really given it your all, we're still proud. Rather than you failed, it wasn't good enough. What are you doing wrong? As I say, I think that's where a lot of these conflicts seem to arise, and when people become scared of hard work. So yeah, I agree. I agree from that side.
Yeah, I'm kind of just selfishly turning this towards parenting, although most people listening to this don't have kids, I assume.
I find the parenting talk very interesting. I just can't relate yet.
Right.
Just wait.
Yeah.
Have I made you suitably paranoid, though?
No, I'm pretty laid back. So I have a poker question, actually. I was supposed to ask it earlier, but got sidetracked into parenting. Are there any so you coach a ton of elite players like Fedor Holz. I think there was some point in like this huge high roller tournament. I don't know if it was a 25K or 50K buy-in, where you had 5 or 6 guys that you coached at the final table or something like that.
Oh no, that's not that good. In the 300K, I had 3 people in the tournament and 2 of them final tabled it. So Fedor chopped for second, and then I was also working with Matt Berkey, and he came 5th in that. And then I've just got to think about who I publicly got, because I have to say only people who've given me testimonials. And then I worked with Brian Rast, and then he won the 50K. I had someone else go very, very deep in that 50K as well. So I had 2 of those tournaments, 2 of the bigger tournaments this summer with people, multiple people at the final table.
Is there any general statement that you can make that about how world-class players or elite players are different than your, I don't know, slightly like good players? You're good players but not great players, or your average players?
I would definitely say there's quite obvious professionalism differences. And it's the edges in the professionalism that takes someone who's, let's say, someone who's high stakes to someone who's nosebleeds. Mm-hmm. And when, there are quite clear, I mean, obviously I do the podcast where we talk to these guys about what their days look like, what their routines look like, all of these things. And these guys have, most of them have everything in place. And they've looked for every single edge. I mean, we've spoken to Fedor about it, and, he takes it seriously, like the research he put into getting his chair to sit in for his, and for like which sport he's going to do to clear his mind best for his poker sessions. And then having his food all prepared for him in Las Vegas by someone that he could trust to make the right sort of healthy food for him to be at his best in those games. And, all of this effort in every part of their lives going towards being a better poker player at the table. Even the things that aren't poker, going towards improving your poker, so maximizing rest and just everything like that. And that seems to be the biggest difference that I notice. There's very few. I haven't yet spoken to someone who's very high stakes, who you wouldn't be incredibly impressed with in terms of the way they live their life in total.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting strategy that I've tried on and off, where you change your whole life, like you kind of improve your whole life just based upon poker, or for me at the time it was more like teaching, My eating had to do with just having better energy levels. Everything was just around making myself better at that one thing.
And I mean, it doesn't mean that you don't have balance in your life. Mm-hmm. Because you were still going to eat anyway, that you were still going to play a sport, all of those things. But what it does mean is that there's sort of a thoughtful process, a reflection on all of those different things in your life, so that you can so that you're promoting the one activity that you want to be truly world class in to the very top. I mean, something that I repeat time and time again on the podcast, in my sessions to people, and I think people don't quite understand it enough, or they don't think of it enough as they're getting through their days, is poker is a professional sport like every other professional sport. but most people treat it as if it's a recreation or a hobby. So if you had an Olympian who was a 100-meter runner and he said, well, I don't like training, I only train 2 hours a week, he'd say, well, he's got absolutely no chance of winning. This is ridiculous. What's he doing trying to get into the Olympics? I will talk to lots of people telling me their goal is to get a bracelet at the World Series or win a W Coupe, and they do an hour of study a week. And I'm like, okay, well, you're not going to do that. You're not going to win.
So,
And they're like, oh yeah, but it's like, it's just a complete lack of professionalism. And then the diet, the exercise, the sleep, all of these things give you an edge over the people who aren't doing it. It doesn't guarantee you'll win, but if you're not really organizing all of those things in the current poker climate, I don't think you can expect to be successful.
One of the things that strikes me about all these things you're describing, Elliot, is that all the professionalism and auxiliary sort of aspects of poker, even if none of these gave you an increased edge at the table, it sounds like they're all things that improve your life all around. So
it's not going to be a negative for you if you get in
exactly.
shape, live a happier life. I mean,
yeah,
it's a bonus anyway. There's no real downside to it. But I mean, I would certainly say from what I've seen and when clients I've worked with have changed these things in their life, it is honestly the easiest increase, big blind per 100, to make technical changes to increase your big blind per 100. It's actually pretty difficult to change your game around and find these leaks and things like that. I notice with almost all clients who aren't doing these things, when they make these changes, they gain 1 or 2 big blinds per 100.
How do you help facilitate that change?
Well, within the hypnotherapy, you can sort of see yourself from a third-person perspective and start to see the reality that we're hiding from ourselves of how we're actually living our lives. So, I'll have someone visualize themselves playing their last week of poker, and I'll be saying, okay, so what does it look like? How are you sitting? And, sometimes they'll be saying, oh, I'm sitting there, I'm hunched over, I'm eating pizza, I'm watching YouTube, and I'm playing poker. And then I'll say, okay, I'd like you to imagine that's someone you're staking. What do you think about staking that person? And they say, well, I'd never stake that person. And then I'll say, well, okay, well, that's you. That's how you're treating your career. So, just trying to bring everything very sharply into focus and into reality. And oftentimes, as you start doing that with people, they appreciate that if you wouldn't back yourself, there's no way your behavior is acceptable.
Right. And are there steps you tell them to take afterwards, or it's just... So my first session with you was just like, there was no steps afterwards, but I remember, feeling the load off my shoulders, just feeling like great, but exhausted at the same time. And it was, I don't know what the right word is, but it was a big change. Yeah, there was a big impact, a big change. Go ahead.
I mean, so what I'll often do, it depends on the issues. So, I mean, if it is purely a doing, study, and working issue, then I mean, I'll send the person a sample schedule to make their own one for their time zone, and try and start living to that schedule. For other people, I mean, it's enough. We've worked through an issue that's been holding them back. The change will be automatic. I mean, I believe, again, it's all sort of belief. I do see hypnotherapy and any form of psychology, really, I see as art rather than science. There's science behind it, but I don't believe we're at the stage where it's outside of their, these are arts really, where we're doing what should work and what feels right for the individual and guiding them through that process. Now, often we have these mental barriers that make things feel like there's a force field in front of us and we just can't get through it, and getting to the gym just feels impossible or whatever it might be. And hypnotherapy is a way of removing those things, and then it's suddenly being like, oh, well, I can go for a jog if I want to, because literally it's putting my shoes on and going outside.
Right. So I feel like the majority of questions I ask you are a bit like saying, how do I play poker? Or, should I play tight or loose? Or like, I have ace king and the board 7-3 deuce, better check. The answer is kind of always, it depends. And I think that's... that's like the art versus science thing that you're talking about.
Exactly. And I mean, I guess it's a bit like with, with live poker. If you're given the hand histories but you can't see the tells, then what do the hand histories really mean? Do you know what I mean? Do you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I agree. There aren't really right or wrong answers in these things, but within the sessions, often it's very clear to the person it's right, because they'll be breaking down in tears, as I said, or they'll feel a weight come off their body, and typically afterwards, just life feels a bit different than it did before the session. So it's clear that something has changed, but again, it's something that's as I say, with any form of therapy, it's very hard to put a number into that, or to really try and describe something that's so.
Right.
I mean, to some extent, there's almost no language for those things.
It's the same exact thing with teaching. There's a whole bunch of fundamental stuff you need to know, just like I assume with hypnotherapy, but teaching at the highest level is really just understanding the person you're talking to on like the deepest level possible, and then knowing how to adjust to that.
I would agree completely, and also very close to teaching in that. I mean, I was interviewed for a documentary about hypnotherapy, and it's quite difficult answering these questions on it. So someone was saying sort of what makes a good hypnotherapist? Is it what they know? And I said, well, it is what they know to some extent, but rapport is probably more important than what the person knows. Because if you truly want to help the person and they want to help themselves and they're willing to be honest and open with you, that's more important than any slight variation on the technique. So, and I'm sure it's the same in teaching, that, you might have someone who knows a bit more about teaching, but someone with a stronger rapport with the student will probably teach them more.
Right. Absolutely. So, what are like... I'm trying to think... This might be too hard of a question. Are there like fundamentals of hypnotherapy that like you kind of like, so like the basis in poker is like you should generally play tight aggressive. There's some basic rules, like some sayings. Are there any of those for hypnotherapy? Like basic guidelines?
Well, as I say, there's different versions of it. I mean, there are people who do waking hypnotherapy. There are people who so don't believe in hypnotherapists who don't believe hypnotherapy exists even, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, what the hell is hypnotherapy to start with?
Yeah, so wonderful question, and one that no one can really answer. All we can really say is that you can put yourself into I like to compare it to meditation. So in guided meditation, or any form of meditation, you're looking to reach a state of relaxation and inner peace where you're looking to clear your mind completely. Hypnotherapy, we're looking for that same state of relaxation or inner peace, or however you want, or trance, or however you want to describe it. But instead of clearing your mind completely, we want your mind absolutely focused on one topic, which is the topic that we're looking to improve. So that's the difference. So it's very close to guided meditation, but with an intense focus rather than a complete emptiness of the mind. So that's the best way of describing it from that side. And there's actually been some recent research this week where they had people in I want to say MRI scanner, which I hope is correct, who were listening to hypnotherapy MP3s, and the people who were more susceptible to hypnotherapy, it actually changed the way their brain was working. So it is demonstrated. You can demonstrate that hypnotherapy does change the way you perceive the world within the hypnosis session, but we're really at the early stages of all of that research.
I see. I think an interesting part is I don't know if the right word is regression. You kind of focus on an area, then you say, go back X amount of years or something like that.
So the way I'll explain that, the way I do the the finding the root cause of an issue, which again not all hypnotherapists would do, but it's the route that I choose. Is someone comes to me with, let's say it's a huge tilt issue that's an anger issue, and I'll get them to describe a situation where that came up. So my aces were cracked, or whatever it might have been that triggered that at the table. I'll then ask them to describe to me the physical sensation when that happened. And usually when people have strong emotion, they'll be very aware of what their physical emotion they get with that emotion, the physical sensation they get with that emotion is. So often it's a pressure in the chest, or their face tightens up and goes red, or they feel it in their fists, or wherever that person feels that issue. With anxiety, it's usually a sickness in the stomach or a ball in the chest or something like that. I'll then ask them to really make that feeling vivid in their body and then connect it back to an earlier time in their life they felt that way. And then I'll repeat that process again and again and again. And this is usually where the subconscious will just lead us back to the root cause, because there is a reason why that same feeling was stimulated at the poker table. There's no reason to be furious about your aces getting cracked if you understand the game. So something in the subconscious is doing it. The subconscious knows what that is, even if you don't. So we can literally just follow that chain of events backwards until we find what that root cause is. And then typically it's something in childhood between the ages of 5 and 11 would be on average where it comes from. Sometimes a bit older, but the vast majority between sort of 5 and 11 in formative years.
That's so cool.
Yeah. As I say, I was so impressed I went to learn it.
Why do you think it's so difficult for people to do that process you just described? I think a lot of people, if somebody decided to sit down and try to just close their eyes and trace that path back on their own and think about, why do I get frustrated when my aces get cracked, it would be very difficult to do that. Why do you think it's so difficult?
Often it's because, I would say the biggest issue initially is that people aren't trying to do that. They're trying to think, why am I angry? My aces got cracked, and they're linking it to issues at the poker table. So they're thinking, well, I don't get angry when this happens, but I do get angry with my aces, and they think it's something to do with poker. Most poker players, I would assume, think that when they go and see a poker mindset coach, they're going to be talking about poker. I mean, not everyone has the same beliefs that I do, that these things are coming from away from the table. The second side of it is that often the root causes are things that we don't want to think about or don't want to talk about, because they're if something's created something to change your personality in an irrational way, often it's not something particularly pleasant. So we don't like taking ourselves to those things, and that's where it's helpful working with a therapist who will help push you through and work through the issues that usually we don't want to talk about or sort of be around.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I think during our first session, like, just the topics you were discussing just made me start, like, bawling, crying. It was so intense.
Yeah, and it's really hard to describe to someone what this... Well, actually, it might be interesting if we ask you, because obviously you're on the other side of it. How would you describe what it's like to someone who hasn't been in a hypnotherapy session?
So it starts with just getting in a very relaxed state, and I've been meditating for a while, but you can get... When I did the session with you, I think you got me into a very relaxed state very quickly, more quickly than I would myself. And it was slightly different. Like, I think I felt a little bit more relaxed than I typically do when I meditate. And it is just that going back, peeling back the layers, going to root causes, and it's just... You remember things that you think you've completely forgot, and it's just really intense and cathartic, and I've never felt a weight off my shoulders before. That was the first time I ever did. First and only time, actually. But you just feel complete weight off your shoulders and completely exhausted afterwards. And I think an important thing is, I don't think I came to you with a really big problem, although maybe not, but you don't really have to see a mental game coach or like a therapist just because something's really wrong. Like if something's decent and you want to get to really good, I would recommend seeing you. It's I think in our society in the US, I don't know how it is in the UK, it's like you don't seek therapy or intervention or something unless there's a problem, you know.
Yeah, and I think, I guess to some extent that's where I'm really trying to shift my business and how things work, because in honesty, the most value is probably for the who are top, getting that edge to reach the top.
Can you say that again? You broke up.
Sorry. So if we're talking about, say, the dollar value of my sessions, in honesty, it's someone who's very close to high stakes or very close to nosebleeds, optimizing the small thing that's holding them back to jump into that next level up, to reach that next level. The financial difference between those two levels is absolutely vast, and it's often not huge issues holding them back from that. So it's, it really is optimizing rather than necessarily, as you say, resolving a desperate issue. If someone has truly desperate poker tilt issues, it's unlikely they're going to have been successful enough to be working with a mindset coach financially. So a lot of the work is definitely that I do is, I'm working with some of the best players in the world, and it's, they haven't got major issues. There's
Right.
no way. They're very balanced, very intelligent people who are just looking for, again, it's that right chair at the table. It's that absolute, just dialed in as high as you can be.
I kind of look at it as like the low-hanging fruit a bit. So a lot of poker players optimize their ranges and spots they've spent, thousands of hours on, or played millions of times, and trying to get that 0.1%. But there's a lot of value that if there's some low-hanging fruit or some big leaks in your game, like the peripheral game, I guess I'll call it, like mental game or health or fitness, improving that is going to be, one, really easy, and two, very impactful.
Yeah, and as you said, I think you put it perfectly. It's all of the low-hanging fruit. Let's get all of that before we worry about another 100 hours of PO solver. It's just like, okay, like, you know all your ranges perfectly, but you're still calling when you know that you're beaten. Okay, well, let's solve the calling when you know that you're beaten issue, and then we'll worry about your balance. And I think a lot of people do that the wrong way around. They're incredibly immersed in the technical side of the game, but with huge life leaks that are quite clearly damaging the sort of the win rate that they have.
Right. This might be too personal of a question, but you've been very successful as a coach, and I remember working with you 3 years ago, and the difference between the level of clients you're working with, the amount of business you are getting, I would assume as well, is staggering. Was that intentional at all? Was that any strategy there, or just kind of happened organically, or what?
It was. I mean, I'll be honest. I always. This is an ego thing. I always assumed, once I realized the impact it was having on poker players, I always believed eventually, when word got out, I'd be working with the best players in the world. Like, I genuinely, I was seeing people's games change, and the level of focus, and the increased tournament wins at the lower stakes when people were working with me, and there was no reason to believe it wouldn't have the same impact at the higher stakes. And I would actually argue the impact is higher at the higher stakes, because mindset and focus is more important than, technically they're all pretty much the same, give or take, but the mental game's more important in those levels. But I was completely reliant on word of mouth advertising, because having an advert that says, I'm a hypnotherapist, I'll make you play poker better, doesn't go down very well in the poker market, because everyone's skeptical, understandably. And as I said, I was prior to using hypnotherapy myself. So, I mean, it took a while for the sort of the word of mouth to build, but then it became like a snowball. And, it would be that I would get brutally fully booked and just like realize that I couldn't continue. I'd up my price. I'd get brutally fully booked, up my price, get brutally, and I'll be honest, it's just continued down that line, and obviously I'm really happy with the way it's gone. But yeah, I mean that's basically how I've marketed the business. Obviously, having the podcast helped. Having people, I mean, my clients won all the money this year, and like last year I worked with Brian Rast for the Super High Roller Bowl, and he was my only client in it, and he won it. This year I had 3 clients in it, and they came like 2nd, 5th, and 20th. Yeah, like it's been ridiculous, the success that people have had. I don't know if this is going to be repeated year after year, but it's like the scoops, loads of the scoops were won by my clients, then the W Coops, and then this year's scoops as well, and now the World Series. And yeah, it's just you can't buy advertising, like just honest results, and that's it basically. They're just honest results, and it really, I may have just run like God. I don't know. I'm hoping that's not the case. but at the moment, certainly, the results have been so extreme that, and the reviews and things from people testimonials have been so helpful that it's kept me really busy.
Do you like rugby?
Yeah. I mean, I used to play rugby as a kid. I don't watch tons of it. But anymore now in America, is it even on TV here?
Right. So this is actually a related question. So the reason I hired you initially is because I read this book about, I think it was the UK rugby team, and the book was authored by the coach of the team, and they took him from just really shitty team to winning the World Cup or something like that. Title of the book is called Winning, if you guys want to read it. It's actually pretty good. And it was really cool because he hired all these different coaches to help the team. So he had one coach that specialized in, I think it was eye movement. So,
EMDR.
Yeah, so they would know where to look and look in the right places and focus. He hired military guys to help them with their discipline and workouts, mental coaches and all that. And, I had a bunch of students. I thought, well, fuck, I should do this for my students as well. And I decided to kind of look you up, and then it was basically, after I did a session with you, I basically just recommended you to every single one of my students, basically. And every single time, they were all just really pumped, especially Mark. He was insanely pumped afterwards.
Well, I definitely appreciate it. And as I say, that was the only way that marketing worked for me. Because, as a random, reading an internet forum post or an email blast that said, work with this hypnotherapist, I just didn't, I would get no answers. It's quite rugby though. I've actually in semi-contact with some international rugby players at the moment about potentially working with them. So it may end up being another niche. We'll have to see how it works out over the next few months.
Right. Go ahead, Doug.
I wanted to mention, Elliot, you kind of talked about a little bit earlier that some of the lower stakes player may not be in a financial position where they're able to hire you for much coaching, but you also have a lot of other things you offer. I know you have the mental game MP3 recordings for pre-session and post-session. You've got webinars. I know that you recently kind of revamped your website and built sort of an online classroom with your webinars. Would you like to talk a little bit about that, what you did there?
Yeah, so we're changing things up from that side. So basically, I mean, there's a big product we're about to launch that I haven't told you guys about yet, but there's basically I've made a video series, like a training course on improving your volume and focus at the table. which I think it's like a 20 video course, like short videos with homeworks and worksheets to fill out. And then I've been really lucky. It's got bonus content from like Fedor, from Olivier Busquet, Rob Tinian, Daniel de Boerres, and I'm going to offend other people by forgetting that they've like really, really good players and stuff. And we're going to be launching. Oh, I think we've lost someone.
I'm still here. Doug went out. Yeah, he'll add back in. You go ahead.
Okay, so I'm launching that in hopefully the next week or so. The full launch. We've done a beta, is it called a beta launch? We've done a basic launch on that to a few people, but the full product's going to be launched in about a week's time. So really excited to see how the market take up that. I've got the webinars I do with Trisha. I've got the MP3s. I've got the podcasts that we put up for free with loads of free information from amazing players, such as yourself, Daryl. You came on our show.
Yes.
And then, the other thing that's also changing up, I had someone I worked with years ago who, like me, got a lot out of it, and he actually went and trained at the same place that I trained. And I believe that I'm going to be helping sort of launch him to the poker market, and so sort of be at a lower price option for people as well. Because the reality is that, there's a section of the market that I'm working with at the moment, and I have to now say to people, sometimes I'll be saying to people, I don't think I can take your money. It makes no sense for you to spend this percentage of your bankroll on mental game coaching, because it's not right. The amount of your bankroll you'll spend on sessions with me will undermine the sessions that we're doing. So hopefully, I don't want to be too ahead of myself because it's not all 100% confirmed, but I'm assuming there's going to be someone else who is working in this poker market with hypnotherapy, specializing more in the lower stakes over the next few months.
Really dumb question. What's a webinar?
Sorry?
Really dumb question. What is a webinar?
So I've done webinars with Trisha, who I do the podcast with. So it's like a seminar on an online seminar where we'll give a PowerPoint, and then there'll be however many people signed up doing a Q&A with them afterwards, where they'll text in questions and we'll answer the Q&A. So we did some webinars, probably 3 or 4 last year, and they're available to purchase on my website, the older ones as well.
What's the name of your website?
pokermindcoach.com.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, you're all back.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I dropped out, I think about halfway through your answer to the last question I asked you, but I came in at the point where you were mentioning the beta launch of your new platform for your webinars.
Yeah. And
I attended one of your webinars a little while back on developing and maintaining focus, and really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I got a lot of value out of it. And I hopped into the beta launch too, took advantage of the lower price point, so now I need to get through some of the other ones now.
Doug has a note here about a super seminar with Fedor hosts or something.
Okay, so it actually got cancelled officially today.
Okay.
Basically we had so Fedor before Scoop, initially, we were looking to do a seminar where he was doing the vast majority of the content, and he just wanted me to do a short part of the seminar explaining the importance of the mental game and as a preparation, things you need to do to prepare for going into a series. So the mistakes people make, the things they do, the things they don't do, as a part of the seminar that he was creating. And it was a very high-end seminar. It was $1,500 a ticket, and it sold out, and it was going to be just before the WCOOP. But his life's changed an awful lot, as you can probably imagine, after the last 6 months. And he's got more interesting things to do than work on building a seminar for 3 weeks. so that got cancelled officially today, I think. So that's not going ahead, unfortunately.
So you've worked with a ton of these players, and you've had a big impact on their lives, I would assume, since they keep hiring you. How have they impacted your life? Have they made any significant changes? Has it been positive for you as well?
I think I'll be honest. It's just very nice talking to very intelligent people through my day.
Right.
I do sometimes think, wow, I'm lucky. It's quite rare in real life that you meet very, very highly intelligent people, and even rarer that they'll give you the time of day. So I feel very fortunate that because of the nature of the work that I do, I get to spend a lot of my day talking to very, very interesting people with great ideas who make me think about the world in a different way, and open my eyes to some things that I perhaps wouldn't have thought of myself. Obviously, and the other side of it is working with these people has dramatically increased my popularity as a coach. I'm sure had I not been working with very high stakes players, I wouldn't be as busy. So, obviously they've had a huge impact on the testimonials from people like Fedor. It does have a big impact on my business. I can't pretend that it doesn't. It is certainly since this summer, the number of people who contact me and they say, because Fedor tweeted about you, is probably 60% of the people who contact me now.
Right. So what are your routines like? What does your days look like?
My day at the moment, the girls get me up about 6 a.m.
Jesus. All right.
Right? And then I look after them till 7. I then have my breakfast. I then start at 8 o'clock. Depending on the day, I usually try and hike.
Oh, wait. What's for breakfast? What do you?
I have a 2 fried eggs, avocado, and hot sauce sandwich.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And then I try and go for a hike about 5 days a week. I'm in Utah, and we live basically on the side of a mountain. So I do that a few times a week. And then I'm just doing sessions. I do a lot of sessions in the day. Usually I'm working pretty consistently from the morning all the way up until quite late at night, because I have people in different time zones. So my day will be like work hour, 90 minutes, have a gap for maybe 45 minutes, work another hour with a different client, maybe someone straight after, maybe that's when I'll do my hike, and that just continues, and I do that Monday to Friday. And then the only other things that change is I see a personal trainer a couple of times a week, and I've started doing something that I've been telling my clients to do for ages, which is embarrassing. I wasn't doing it before, but I wasn't. And that's, I now have my meals delivered by a healthy meal delivery company. And it's just anyone, especially, for me, I was so busy that we would end up sometimes getting convenience food and things like that. So it's just so convenient having tasty, healthy food delivered, and then you just like microwave it for 90 seconds and have a healthy meal. Especially for MTT guys, when you have a 5-minute break, so many of the guys playing MTTs that I talk to will tell me they're all they eat is pizza. They get delivery pizza every day. If you have healthy food there instead, and you can eat that's an enormous change. As I say, I've been telling people it's the best way of doing it for poker players for years, and then I thought, well, I'm really busy. Perhaps it's the best way for me as well as the poker players, and genuinely it is. I think I'm going to be doing this long term.
Do you have any sort of pre-session routine that you do for warming yourself up before having a session with a client?
Only that I'll read through their notes.
Okay.
So I'll read through the notes and go through it. I try and do meditation most days, either one of my own MP3s, or I'll use Headspace or something along those lines.
I have to interrupt because I'm interested in notes. What's your note taking like? Is there any things that you kind of always put in there, or do you have a system?
I'll be honest, no. I just the things that interest me that I think are like, let's say, so it will be the key points of the session. And then if I've got a feeling that something is a key point, but the person hasn't yet told me it's a key point.
Ah, cool.
So oftentimes what someone doesn't say is actually quite significant. So I'll sometimes take notes of that and see how things progress in a future session, and if that's something I have to push them on, or if it's generally something that isn't important. So I mean, it's not huge, it's not massive amounts of notes, but it's just things that will refresh my mind ready for the next session. And also write down, like, if I've set people homework, what homework I set them and things, because I am dealing with a lot of people in the week, and unless I write those sorts of things down, I won't remember what I've set in each individual as homework for the week, because it's just not possible.
Yeah, I find I'd make notes for coaching sessions, and when I used to coach a ton, you would just forget absolutely just what you worked on and just so many things, and I found it really valuable.
I don't think I could do this. I couldn't do this effectively if I wasn't taking notes on each session.
Right. So I forgot what the question was, but you go ahead, keep on answering it if you remember the question.
Oh, well, the question was, how do I take the notes? And I mean, that's
the one Doug asked.
Oh, sorry, Doug. I don't.
I think you pretty much answered it. I was just asking if you had a routine that you do warm-ups before a session. Yeah.
I mean, the only thing that might be interesting to you guys that people might not be aware of is, right, I'm dealing with quite emotional stuff a lot of the day, and I definitely go through stages where I feel the transference from the sessions, and I can feel the sort of the negativity of the sessions affecting me. And I'll actually see a sort of a hypnotherapist every couple of weeks to work on stress. And I'll also be mindful of doing like meditations after particularly difficult sessions as a cool down before I go into the next one. So that's something that I really learned the hard way, that I had to take control of, because it's surprisingly stressful. Well, maybe not surprising, but it surprised me how stressful it was working with other people's stresses and problems, and how much of it you do internalize when you're in this sort of work.
That leads me to another question I have for you. Do you think that a post-session cool down for poker players is just as important as preparing properly for a session? And do you think that it gets as much attention as preparing for a session?
I think it depends on, again, it depends. It's, as you say, it's like like how you play a hand.
Yeah.
For some players, it's probably even more important, and they're the players who can't let go of the hands after their session, and it impacts their life or their sleep. So for the guys where it really, some guys literally, if they make it, it's usually if they make a mistake rather than bad beats that haunt people. They've made a mistake, it's cost them a big tournament. Sometimes guys won't be able to sleep afterwards, and that will be the start of a bad week for them. If that's in your personality, then having a cool down routine is incredibly important. If it has zero impact, I think it's still good form to have something in place as a cool down, but if it's impacting your outside life, if you're taking it out on your girlfriend, if you're not sleeping, anything of that nature, then it has to be absolutely imperative you do not drift away from that.
Yeah, I can very much relate to that.
Yeah, it can really, as I say, you don't want your job impacting the quality of your life. And if it's starting to do that, then things like the cool down will make a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you only cool down if you feel like it's impacting you after the session.
Oh no, well, I was saying I think it's good form for people to do it anyway, but I think it's absolutely no flexibility has to be done every time if you're someone who it impacts your life drastically. So I don't think it's never going to be a bad thing to do a 10-minute meditation and journal how your session went. It's going to be helpful, but if it's really impacting your life, it's not a case of this is helpful. This is necessary for you to live a happy life and be the best player you can be.
This is kind of a weird question. Does hypnotherapy help with your meditation? And it's weird just because the word help is kind of a weird one. But
yeah, I would say, when I do, if you listen to Headspace or anything like that, it is virtually the same as a hypnotherapy induction. There's such small differences between something that's considered meditation or something that's considered hypnotherapy. So yeah, certainly if you're listening to the hypnotherapy MP3s, you'll probably notice if you do a Headspace or another program for meditation, it will be easier for you to reach that level, and vice versa. If you're someone who meditates frequently, you'll probably get more out of a hypnotherapy session than someone who's never done any meditation before, because you'll be more aware of the state and you're sort of taking yourself to that state. So you can usually take yourself further if it's something you're well practiced in.
So you usually use Headspace or some other program?
Well, I either do one of my own inductions in my mind, one of my MP3s, or Headspace.
Okay.
At the time.
Right. And what is do you have a favorite induction that you always use that's one of your own, or do you switch it up?
For myself, I always just use the same. And it's not necessarily, I mean, they're all just serving a purpose. It's just relaxing your body and then usually relaxing your mind with some sort of counting and visualization attached to it. So there's not one that's drastically more powerful or different to any other. It's just being aware and choosing to relax your body and then deepening it with, as I say, some sort of count, and then a visualization until you're in a state of, and it's called bypassing the critical faculty, but until you're basically in a daydream, a deep daydream, and that's where sort of the hypnotherapy is.
Right. I actually never listen to Headspace, or I don't even use music all that often.
And I mean, that's, if you can do it without, there's certainly nothing wrong with that. I just find it, I mean,
it's very difficult.
It's just so easy to follow, as I say, like one of the MP3s or something like that, where you're just being guided through the process. You still, I mean, like you said, with the hypnotherapy, you felt that you were in a deeper state. Guided meditation is exactly the same thing. It's just a faster way to the deeper state.
Yeah. So I actually prefer, so there's a whole bunch of different methods of meditation, and I kind of like following my own thoughts and recognizing patterns after, if you do it long enough and consistently enough, you notice kind of interesting patterns and how your mind works, and just how, like,
that's very cool.
Yeah, just like how one thought generally leads to another, or what type of thoughts come up, and categorizing those thoughts. It's pretty interesting. Another thing I like to do is being able to, so when you do it with no music and nothing, it's very uncomfortable and very painful. And I think it has to do a lot just with your thoughts and just sitting around doing absolutely nothing and no help. Because it's a nice, I don't want to use the word crutch, but it just makes it simpler. It's a nice crutch to just have a Headspace on or some relaxing music. It's interesting to be able to kind of be really uncomfortable and practice sitting with that discomfort without judgment, without making it worse. Because I think something, as you know, is a lot of the problem with anxiety is being anxious about being anxious, or having anxiety about having anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the ability to just say, okay, right now I'm really fucking anxious, and this is really difficult, but I'm just going to sit there and wait for it to pass, is a fun kind of exercise to have.
Yeah, and obviously it's going to really, really build your mindset from that side as well, your tolerance to those sorts of things. So yeah, I mean, I agree. It's that's a tougher and probably more effective way of doing it. But as I say, I use it as I've got 10 minutes. I want to clear my mind, let go of all of this stress as quickly as possible.
Right.
And then move on with my day.
Yeah, one isn't better than the other.
I'd be honest, from what you described, I would say potentially what you're doing, it would actually be better in terms of mental strength, if you compare the two, because as you say, you're learning to tolerate the discomfort, whereas with the apps and the relaxation, there's less tolerance being built from that side. In terms of releasing the stress, they're going to be almost identical because the process is the same, but the actual just building a level of almost physical, mental strength around it, I would say if you can sit in discomfort, in silence, and push yourself through it, that's never going to be a bad thing.
It's interesting that you say that, Elliot. I was just gonna ask you, both of you, I guess, this question. I've heard Tommy Angelo talk about these meditation apps before, and he's a big proponent of meditation. And he talked about the idea that these apps are great and they're very helpful, but that he views them as sort of training wheels. And he kind of argues that the goal of anyone using an app like that should be to get to a point where their meditation practice is just themselves sitting alone with their breath and nothing else. And he argues that he thinks that's much more valuable and helpful, and that should be the end goal. Do you guys think there's any sort of truth to that? And Elliot, you kind of sounded like you thought it might be more helpful to be doing unguided meditation.
Well,
sorry. You go, Daryl.
I don't think you can call yourself an introvert unless you can sit by yourself and not have an anxiety attack.
Fair enough.
I mean, I think with I can understand what Tommy's saying, certainly, in terms of it is an easier process to reach that stage. I think where probably my thoughts around it and Tommy's thoughts are different is that obviously all of my work's around hypnotherapy. So the difficult things that you might be trying to work through in meditation, that's what I was talking about in terms of using a therapist to push you through those hard things. So whereas my meditations are probably relatively comfortable when I'm doing it, when I'm doing hypnotherapy sessions, I'm being pushed through the difficult stuff by someone trying to push me through those things. And you get a different sort of release, I believe, from using the hypnotherapy, which is sort of a more direct and I would almost say aggressive approach to releasing emotion and working through it than meditation. But if you're looking to do it on your own and not be working through these things, then I agree with him. That's probably a better way of doing it. Does that make sense, Daryl, in terms of your experience with the session with me and the way I'm trying to describe that?
I'm not sure. I would guess so.
It can be no, but it's more just the sort of so with the meditation, it's sort of you're pushing yourself through it, and as you say, it can be difficult to just follow your breath and take control of your mind in that way.
Oh yeah, with the hypnotherapy, it's definitely someone pushing you through it and kind of helping you along, kind of guiding you. Absolutely.
Yeah, and sort of forcing you through those walls that would be difficult to get yourself through.
Forcing's probably a better word than guiding. Yeah.
Pushing. Yeah.
I just think there's a whole bunch of different ways, and it's kind of fun to mix it up. There's a visual meditation where you could kind of just focus on the way things look, and it's pretty interesting because it changes your perspective on how you view the world when you look at something and stare at it for a while and do that deeply and with a high level of concentration. You notice beauty in very simple things, or you find things pretty interesting or fascinating. Like, if you really spend time looking at a plastic bottle, I mean, there's so many thoughts you can have about a plastic bottle. The whole chemical composition of the plastic bottle, how maybe plastic bottles were invented, the way it looks, where do these bottles go, or maybe environmental thoughts, and it's, I mean, that one wasn't as interesting, but there's a lot of objects if you could really just sit and look and think about them for an infinite amount of time if you wanted and not run out of things. And that has been very impactful on my life because a lot of times I can go throughout the day and just notice really simple things and get a lot of joy out of them, or a lot of interesting thoughts out of them as well.
Yeah, one of the things that I kind of noticed that meditating helped me to notice more and enjoy more is just human interaction and human nature, kind of observing what people are doing around me, whether I'm just in the grocery store or in traffic or whatever. I feel that I'm kind of paying more attention to and picking up more on the human nature, I guess I would call it.
And do you think that's more just that you're more in the moment, you're more in the present since you started meditating?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say so.
Yeah, I don't know if one's better than the other, because like at the highest level, meditation is just, you just do it for the sake of meditating, not for any utility. But
Mm-hmm.
I think unless you mix it up, unless you have a lot of willpower, you're going to get pretty bored if you just do the same thing every time.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think I agree with everything you said, Daryl, about meditating on your own without one of these apps or some sort of a recording to assist you is definitely more difficult and more awkward. And but I feel like when I do sit and meditate on my own with just my breath, I kind of feel like I get more value out of it. And going through that difficult phase of feeling awkward and trying to get it into a good state, I feel helps build my mental strength a bit more.
Yeah, I was reading an interesting book on meditation, and it's saying to kind of quit while you're in the good state, which I thought was pretty interesting and something I never did, because you don't want to have attachment to that feeling good, and I guess just kind of ending it on a high note.
That's quite cool.
Interesting. Yeah, never thought of that.
So before you've really tested yourself, just accept that I can just go on with my day with this good feeling, and I don't have to hold on to this.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's just another method of attachment or form of attachment or something.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah. Meditation's a really interesting subject. I don't think everyone needs to meditate, though. They just need something that makes them calm. So I don't think meditation is for everyone. I think you could say that kind of categorically for any activity. But I think everyone needs some kind of form, something that relaxes them and gives them introspection. And meditation is just one cool way to do that.
I think everyone needs flow in their life in something or another.
Flow states.
So, flow
I forgot
states.
to ask you about flow states. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, right. Well, it's good timing then. I think to some extent the sort of what say I'm looking for a client to reach in hypnotherapy is where nothing else really exists, and all that exists is the conversation we're having and the thoughts that are going through their mind. And I believe that that's one of the reasons it feels so relaxing, is that we've quieted all of the other voices. And those flow states happen when you get good at anything as well. So you guys will notice that in poker, sometimes you're in flow, you're in the moment. And I believe that when we spend time in those states, that is sort of healthy for us. That helps clear a lot of the clutter. And I think that's why people find themselves sort of really fixated on a certain hobby or whatever it might be. So for some people, they might have to meditate to feel those things, but for other people, it may be playing a piece of music and being lost in the music, or painting, or I used to do the MMA stuff, and I remember feeling that when I was fighting, that was just a case of being in flow, and that was just what it felt like to me at the time. So I think that's a big part of, like you were saying, everyone has their thing, but it's important that you do have your thing, to be able to sort of calm the other voices and be in control for that period of time, and just enjoy being truly in the present, because that's all that exists for you in those moments.
Have you read Rise of Superman?
No, I haven't.
It is a book that's all about flow, and he follows, what's the word for them? The kind of adrenaline sports guys, the guy who just do like parachuting and like wingsuit flying and all that.
Like extreme sports?
Extreme sports, yeah. He follows all those guys and goes through all the mechanisms behind flow and all that stuff. And there's a whole bunch of really interesting stories. The science behind it is fascinating, and it's a much more interesting book than... There's another book by Csikszentmihalyi on flow, and he's kind of one of the big guys, but he's pretty dull.
Is that the one that's actually called Flow?
Yeah, it's called Flow.
Yeah, and that's a little bit more academic, isn't it?
Right,
but
you have to be really into it to read that one.
Yeah. That one's on the shelf. And I mean, something that I think also people chase it to such an extent. I think that can be one of the issues that people have with gambling, because when people gamble, they end up in that flow moment where nothing else in their life seems to exist except the next hand of blackjack or the next roll of the roulette wheel.
Huh.
And I think that's it's something that's certainly come up when I've tried to help people with gambling, is that that's one of their favorite moments, and it's because nothing else exists and they don't have, or they haven't found something else that's providing that for them in their life. So that's their quiet time, and it's just unbelievably damaging and detrimental to them, but that's where they feel they're absolutely in the present, because all that matters is where that ball bounces, or that the next turn of the cards.
You said something to me that I really disagreed with, or it didn't jive with my experiences at all. But you said that you've coached UFC fighters, you coach poker players, and that flow is just as easy in both. Or it's just as easy to get flow in poker than it is in MMA.
Yeah.
Do you still feel that way? Is that what you've experienced with your students?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
How often do you think the top players are in flow during a session?
Oh, in the poker side?
Yeah.
I would say when I would say when they're deep in a tournament, most of the time, they would be absolutely present. I mean, that's what all of the work I do is about, trying to get people into that moment and then stay in that moment for their session. And I believe that obviously it's not something where you're always going to be absolutely in the moment, but you have to remember the length of time that a fight is on versus the length of time a poker session is. So if you said,
so I agree with that.
A fight is 15 minutes long,
right?
If a poker session was 15 minutes, it would be very easy to be. But if a fight was 4 hours, they would be dropping in and out of flow as well, because it's 4 hours long. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's sort of, if you look at minute to minute, it's the same. It's something where you can get into flow. There's obviously going to be ebbs and flows of that throughout a session if it's very long. But getting yourself into that pre-game and then learning techniques to bring yourself back into it during the sessions, I believe that it's possible in both, and that's the whole aim of everything I do, is to try and make it easier for people to do that.
Okay, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So my experience was, I guess I misunderstood you, because my experience was I only get into flow late game, deep in a tournament, and early and middle is very rare that I'm in flow. Was my experience, but that seems to jive with what you're saying, basically.
I would agree.
Well, to some extent, but I would say that the working on early and mid game ways of trying to get yourself into flow would be looking at that part of the tournament and then setting yourself big blind win rates that you're looking to achieve, and turning those into challenges potentially with another player. Because I'm guessing the reason you're getting into it in the late game is because it actually matters to you. And at the beginning, it doesn't really matter to you as much. In the mid game, not so much, because the money's not on the line and there's not the same level of competitiveness within it. So setting challenges within the game and different sections of the game might be helpful for you to feel flow, because there's more of a competitive edge even in those slower parts of the game.
Do you think it makes sense as a tournament player to be interested in early and middle game, but strategically save your energy up just in case, for the last few hours of session where you might be for the late game? So specifically, if I want to get concrete, the way I play, if I'm doing it optimally, early and middle game, is that I meditate and relax a lot between hands if I can. If there's a period where I think I'm going to have 10 to 15 seconds, I'll spend that time trying to just meditate to kind of like save up my energy, make sure I'm good for the late game. but I'm focusing on those other periods. Whereas in the late game, I'm not taking any second off. I'm watching every single second of play, down to how long it takes every player to make a decision.
I would definitely say it's rational what you're doing. I mean, potentially, you need to look at more of those types of breaks to re-energize yourself in the late game as well. Mm-hmm. But I think there's big blind per 100 win rates available in the early and mid stages of tournaments. So many players say exactly what you're saying, which is, I'm not really in the flow. I don't really give the same level of respect to those parts of the game. What that means is there's lots of players not giving it their full attention, and everyone's giving it their full attention in the late game.
Right. So
there's actually probably easier chips and then therefore more deep runs available from the early and mid stages when the good players aren't putting as much effort in as the edge that can be gained at the end of the tournament. But obviously, if it's going to be detrimental to your end of game, then you can't really, if you don't believe it's possible for you to be focused throughout, you can't risk your end game because all of the money is made getting first, second, third, really. Right. But as I say, I think there are a lot of chips left on the table, and I have seen people really change their big blind per 100 win rate dramatically by focusing predominantly on the middle stages, to be honest. So what historically was just post antes. I've seen really big shifts when people say, actually, I'm going to focus and I'm going to see what is available if I focus on every hand during this part of the tournament rather than take it off.
Right. I guess it would be pretty specific. I guess if you're someone who can, handle that level of focus for that long, then just fucking do it. But
also, like, how many tables people are playing. So a lot of the sort of the better players I'm working, or sort of the higher stakes players I'm working with, say better is probably the wrong word, but I would say it's normal now for people to tell me 6 to 8 tables is what they play. And when I started working with players, probably 15 to 20 was what the average person would tell me. So obviously there's a different level of focus that can go into 6 to 8 tables versus 15 to 20 tables. So that's another factor of, do you have highly focused with a lower table count, or do you have a higher table count with less focus? And that's something that individuals have to decide on themselves.
Right. Yeah, I remember when I used the 4 to 6 table a few years ago, people used to think it was crazy. But I think now most people are doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be the right way because you actually have a shot at being, so much of it is, especially with tournament play, and this is I think is an interesting way of looking at the tournaments, is it's not do I have an edge on the field, it's can I put myself in the position to have an edge at the final table versus this field. So, against the other good regs. And I think too many players are like, well, even if I'm 20 tabling, I'll have an edge on the field. But all of the money is first, second, third, really. Right. You're talking about being in the top 10% to even cash, and then really to get paid first, second, third. So I think a lot of the time there's more value in playing the lower table count and giving yourself a good shout at being the best person in the tournament, and actually deserving to win it, rather than hoping to get lucky out of the 20 tables you're playing and, get a deep run that way around and then cost yourself all of that money as well.
Right. So we're about ready to wrap up. I think Doug has a few ending questions.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for coming on with us. This has been a lot of fun.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And you mentioned early on in the podcast that you were interviewed for a hypnotherapy documentary at one point. Yeah. And I was just wondering if that documentary has been released yet, if it's where people can see it, if it has.
It hasn't been released yet. They're in negotiations with, I think they said, the Travel Channel and CNN, and I don't know which one of those two channels is purchasing it, and it's going to be out in the first quarter of 2017.
Okay, cool. And one other question I had is, do you have any books you can recommend to the listeners?
I always recommend this on poker shows, so anyone who's heard me before, I love The Art of Learning.
Amazing book.
I think it's such a good book. So if there's ever a sort of a one book that people should read about poker that doesn't mention poker once, it's The Art of Learning. It's just phenomenal for poker players. So yeah, that would be my top of my list for anyone worrying about their mental game. Ironically, even though there's lots of great mental game books out, I just really think it's well written.
Elliot, you need to listen to the author of that book, Josh Waitzkin's, on the Tim Ferriss podcast. Listen to the first podcast he did on the Tim Ferriss show with him.
Yeah, I will.
It's amazing.
He just impresses me so much.
He coaches like high level businessmen, like multimillionaires and billionaires, on how to perform optimally now.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that's the perfect job for him.
Yeah.
Even if he's now a competitor of mine. I mean,
you find it fascinating. You love it.
Yeah.
He also did a really great talk. I think it was at Google. So that's something. I think it's on YouTube. If you just type in
sure.
Josh Waitzkin Google.
Excellent. Yeah, all his stuff's so good, and
yeah,
as I say, just such an impressive, and even his way of teaching it in the book is excellent as well. It's just
where can people find you, Elliot? What's your YouTubes or Twitters and all that?
So the best one is if you go onto pokermindcoach.com and you're interested in any of this hypnotherapy stuff, you can go on there and download a free hypnotherapy MP3. So you can try it out and see if it's for you or not. So that's the best, obviously. So pokermindcoach.com. And my Twitter is at Elliot Roe 1. And I think that's pretty much it. All of the other stuff's on my website. So if you want to hear the podcasts and things like that, just check out the website.
All right. Thanks for coming on, man. It was really fun.
Really appreciate it. Good luck at the tables, guys.
All right. See you, man.
Thanks, Elliot.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.